And good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Get Smart About Debt. This is being presented by GreenPath and Genesis Credit Union. My name is Bill Folks. I'm a Partner Experience Manager for GreenPath. And what we're going to be talking about today is financial education. And financial education is something we should all continue to engage with, regardless of how much we already know. There are always things we can learn to improve or help to maintain financial wellness. And today we're going to talk about becoming debt-free and some beneficial strategies to help to hopefully make that easier. As I said, my name is Bill Folks. I'm a partner experience manager of GreenPath. I started with GreenPath in 2008 as a financial wellness expert. We called them financial counselors back then. And I was a counselor for about 6.5 years. I joined the partner experience team in the summer 2015, and I've been working directly with our credit union partners ever since then. I'm joined by my colleague Dawn Watson on the partner experience team, and she's going to go ahead and introduce herself.
Thanks, Bill. So again, my name is Dawn Watson, and I'm also a partner experience manager with GreenPath. I've been with GreenPath for over 30 years, much of that time working directly with our clients that are referred over by our partners, and now I work with our partners. GreenPath's mission is to empower people to lead financially healthy lives, and we don't want debt to hold anyone back from realizing their dreams. I'm looking forward to discussing how you can focus on being debt-free as you head into 2023.
All right, thank you, Dawn. And with that, I want to go over our agenda real quick, and I'm just going to make this real brief. Our agenda today is we're going to start by talking about becoming financially healthy, why that's important and what it can mean to you. We're also going to talk about where to start on your journey to become debt free. We're going to talk about the financial impact of carrying too much debt. Follow that, we're going to talk about strategies to pay off your debt. And finally, we're going to talk about strategies to keep your debt low. And I want to start by talking about what being financially healthy means. A financially healthy life means that, number one, a person feels in control of their day-to-day and month-to-month finances. They also have the ability to cover the costs of financial emergency from savings. For most of us, it's not a matter of if a financial emergency is going to happen. It's actually a matter of when. And when that happens, are you able to handle that? If you're able to handle that, then you are financially healthy. Do you have the flexibility to with your money to enjoy your life the way you want to enjoy it, to live your life on your terms? I like to say that doesn't always mean that you're going to be able to always do what you want, but it also means that the answer isn't always going to be no. Sometimes you're going to be able to do what you want, enjoy life, take that vacation, and if you're financially healthy, that's what that means. And finally, are you on the right track to meeting your financial goals? All of us have financial goals, even if we've never articulated them. We all have financial goals, and being on track to meet those goals is what it means to be financially healthy. And if someone's in debt and worried about it, that debt can really impact their ability to be financially healthy. And if so, it's impacting their ability to save, be flexible with their finances, and meet their goals. So let's talk about how do you know if you're overextended. Typically, the path to overwhelming debt is gradual and it's marked with milestones. It's, for most people, it sneaks up on you. It's not something that gets there overnight. One of the first indicators that someone is getting into too much debt is when they're unsure of how much they owe to their various creditors. If you ask yourself or you ask someone else how much debt they have, and if they're not sure, that's a very telling sign. Another worrying sign is when a person is only able to make minimum payments. Today, you know how long it's going to take to pay down debts, as credit card companies must include that information in the statement. Seeing this information in print can be stressful, but it can also be a useful tool to help recognize when someone might need help to focus on their debt. Um, Accessing cash advances. When you see, a lot of times you're assessing cash advances, those are things that are indications that you're overextended. If you're maxed out or over the limit, or receiving collection calls, basically when you see those credit card balances rising, but the income is not, it's indicative that more is being charged each month and than is being made in minimum payments. Cards continue to become maxed out or even worse over the limit. And minimum payments increase when that happens, and payments may start to be missed. And if that happens, that's when collection calls typically start.
Well, thanks, Bill. Okay, now that you have reviewed the warning signs and determined you might have too much debt or headed in that direction, you might be wondering, where do I start? To get control of the situation and not have your debt holding your future hostage, you need to review your entire financial picture. So as we dive into where to start and potential options, I do think it's time to give yourself a little grace. For many of us, finances were never taught in school or discussed at home. Managing your finances may have been more like a trial and error situation, and debt can become overwhelming due to a variety of issues, illnesses, death in the family, divorce, unemployment. A lot of things in life can happen. During my time counseling people about debt, a lot of times it was also not knowing how to create and follow a budget. Budgeting is going to be key on your journey to becoming debt free. So let's start with talking about goal setting. Think about your short term and your long term goals. To work towards being debt free, it's important to set goals for yourself. Know what you're working towards, give yourself some motivation. So, your short term goals are important as they're expected to be accomplished in 12 months or less. You'll actually be able to see the benefits of all of your hard work quickly by achieving your goals. So think about maybe it's saving for Christmas. So, when January comes around, you're done with this holiday season, start factoring that into some of your goals if that's important. Maybe it's eliminating a small balance credit card. But you will also want to think about those long term goals that you may have, like purchasing a home, saving for retirement, paying for college. So here at GreenPath, we often talk about SMART goals. And what this means is making sure the goal is going to be specific. You're going to have a plan to measure your progress towards that goal, that it's attainable. You want to avoid having a goal that will make you frustrated if it's too far out of reach. It should be relevant to you, and you should have a timeline on when you want to accomplish it. So as you consider the goals and to make sure that they are SMART goals, you're also going to need to have a budget. So in its most basic form, the budget's going to include your income, expenses, and debts. So income and debts are usually pretty easy to identify and list. It is important though, when you're looking and creating your budget, that you're factoring everything on that net income, what you actually take home, and don't factor it on income sources that are infrequent. So say you do, say, an odd job every few months and you get paid for it. Since this won't be a regular source of income, you wouldn't want to put it into your typical monthly budget. But this is a great opportunity to use that money to work towards paying off some debts. So I encourage you to list out your debts by reviewing your statements. Know how much you owe and the interest rates that you are paying on that debt. The interest rates will be good to know, as then you can use it to strategize on which debts you plan to focus on first. For some, they like to target those highest interest rates. For others, they target the smallest balances. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just making sure you're making that choice based on what those goals are. This would also be a good time to obtain a copy of your credit report if you haven't reviewed it lately, making sure that there are no debt obligations there that you are unaware of. That's an important part of this process. So you can obtain a copy of your credit report at annualcreditreport.com. So again, if you haven't pulled it, this is a free site where you'll get the report itself. You're not going to get the actual credit score, but we're really looking at this for making sure that we have all of the appropriate information to be able to make some of those financial decisions moving forward. Now, for many, it's the expense side of the budget that always seems to be the most challenging. Don't forget to include, those periodic expenses in your budget, such as car insurance if you want to try to pay it every 6 months or annually, or property taxes if they're not included in your mortgage payment. So these periodic expenses are those expenses that many do end up putting on the credit card because they're not budgeted for ahead of time. And this is again going to result in escalating debt. So one of my colleagues said some words of wisdom, and I believe he got this from some lyrics in a song, but it's not how much you earn in this life, it's how much we spend that keeps us from achieving our goals. So, again, your goals should be around what your abilities are, and I think that's key is don't think about only if I had, let's focus on what we know we have. to be able to make a really, truly achievable and attainable goal. So when people sit down and put a budget together, they find usually, from my experience, anywhere from 35 to 40 different expense items. So, again, as I already discussed, income sources are not as complex. You probably have 2 or 3 income sources in the household, depending on how many wage earners live there. But the expenses can be a troublesome area of the budget. That's why it's so important to get a handle on that budget. So, if for those who want to share, I'd love to hear how many of you have tracked your expenses and have a budget. How many thought that it is a fun experience? And then if you want to share what you've learned, we would love to hear from you. So if you want to put that into all panelists in the chat, that would be great. So what we also want to take out is that a lot of times people, and I'm no different, from everybody else here, we really want to have things immediately. I think that's what kind of gets us in trouble. We see something and we're like, oh, I'm going to make sure I can afford that. And maybe we start playing around with how we choose to spend our money. And in turn, that just creates some new issues that have to be dealt with. So again, really having the plan and sticking to the plan is going to be key. Looks like a couple people have put some things into the chat. Some say that they have never had a budget. Some have said that they've tried to budget, although weren't as successful as they had hoped. So they're going to try to change that as they head into 2023. And let's see what else. Attempt to create a budget, but yeah, thank you for that. I think that's important to just never stop trying, for sure. So now that you've gathered all of your income and your debt, let's work on all of these other expenses. So let's start with reviewing your checking, your savings account statements, your credit card statements to determine where you're spending your money and how much you've been spending it. Again, I know this is tedious, but I do encourage you to review several different months to have a better idea of how much and where your money's been going. If you completely ignore November and December, you won't be factoring in the holidays and the additional costs that typically come with them. If you don't look at the summer months, especially if you have children that are out of school, you may not realize how much extra money you've been spending during that time frame. So we have GreenPath has a budgeting worksheet that we are going to send out to everyone with this recording. So use this tool to start determining where that money has been going. Also, don't forget to add in money you plan to set aside for those goals that we talked about earlier. So once you've done this, you may find it necessary to make some adjustments to your goals. Maybe you need to make them a little bit more realistic, maybe giving yourself additional time to reach them so that you don't have to set aside as much money as you intended to, and that's okay. Or maybe you're going to look at making some sacrifices in other areas in your budget so that you can actually reach the original goal that's planned. Again, it's all about reevaluating and making those decisions and what's right for you. So once you've determined all of your expenses and the amount, add everything up and compare it back to your income. Determine if you do have a surplus or if you have a shortage. If you have money left over, determine how you plan to use that to work towards becoming debt-free. Now, if you would like somebody to help you create a debt-free strategy, you can always reach out to GreenPath for a free confidential one-on-one counseling session, and we'll be sure to give you the contact information before the end of the session. So once you've created your budget, compare it to these financial guidelines that you see here on the screen, and these are from some financial experts. Most people do tend to underestimate their expenses by even as much as 25%. So you need to track it every week, at least for a period of time. The hard work that you've put into creating a budget isn't going to do you any good if you don't track your spending to ensure that you're actually following it or determine if you need to reevaluate the budget. You can track it by either writing everything down or maybe consider getting an app to help you do some of that tracking for you. Now that you have your budget and are tracking it, consider other things that you can do to work towards debt freedom. So if you find extra dollars in your spending plan to accelerate paying down the debts, and that means paying more than the minimum payments, you'll be in better shape. So consider if you're happy with where the dollars are being spent. Are you spending money in line with those goals? If not, a change in the budget should be necessary. We also have a worksheet called Aligning Priorities that we're going to send. It's a great tool to help you reevaluate your spending choices if they don't focus on your goals. Now, through this process, we're looking for changes you might be able to make in that current spending plan to free up more money to pay down or off that debt. And we will come back to some of these potential changes that you could make when Bill discusses those a little bit later on. The other thing that you could consider is liquidating assets as another strategy that is potentially able to be used for paying debt. This is only successful if the funds are actually used to pay the debt and not just to increase spending and to be able to buy more things. So think about your assets. Do you have a vehicle that you could sell? I know in our family, we're just getting ready to do that. Since I work it from home, I have the luxury that I don't have to have a car all the time. Maybe you have some jewelry, video games, or other items that you could sell. We generally don't recommend using your retirement accounts to pay down debt. Definitely talk with a professional to review other options before you consider that step. Now, you can also look to see if you can lower interest rates on your current accounts. That can be really helpful in accelerating the debt. So the interest rates go lower, you continue to pay that same monthly payment, you're going to pay it off much faster. So you could consider communicating with your creditors to ask about maybe hardship programs or internal repayment options that they might be able to offer you. Another option could be to potentially refinance a loan to reduce the interest rates and payments. Make sure you're not, considering just the rate, but how long that new loan is going to take to pay off. Make sure that you're okay with that new term if it's going to increase it. Talk with your lender to determine if there is options that might make sense for you. And we do realize that interest rates have been increasing, so this option may not work today, but that doesn't mean that it might not work for you in the future. It is not until you know where your money really goes that you can make adjustments to your behavior and thus reduce or change expenses in order to free up the money to save to achieve your goals. Within most expense items, there are pockets of savings where you can find money to save by making just small changes in your everyday habits. It is that money that is really going to help you work towards that debt freedom goal. And Bill is going to share those ideas where you can look for some of those savings now.
Thank you, Don. Here at GreenPath, we like to talk about something called the costly C's. And these are things in your budget that start with the letter C that can really cost you if you let it get away from you. Now, of course, there are other things than your budget that don't begin with the letter C, but we like costly C's because it's catchy. So we're going to talk about the costly C's. And those things are coffee, children, carry out, cable, car, and your cell phone. And we're not saying that any of the things on the list I just read are things that you absolutely have to cut out or get rid of. But what we're saying is that let's give them a little bit more of our attention. Because sometimes simply being aware of how our spending habits affect our budget can inspire us to make changes while still enjoying the things that matter to us. So let's start with coffee. I'm a coffee drinker. I drink coffee every single day. And according to Nexavisor in partnership with Time Magazine, making coffee at home in a regular coffee pot is about $50 per year. A French press is about $160 a year, and that's assuming you're using fresh beans. Like I do, I use a French press and I use fresh beans, and they are a little bit more expensive. And a Keurig costs over $500, and this is all yearly. Coffee outside of the home, such as Starbucks, is over $2,000 a year. So ways you can save with coffee at home is number one, brew at home. Obviously, that's a big way to save money on coffee. Use those reusable K filters instead of purchasing the pre-filled K cups. I use those reusable filters as well, and they are just a little bit messier, but not a whole lot. It's not like you're going to be spending all day cleaning your kitchen, but you do have to clean up a little bit after at the end of the day after you're done using them. Also, ask for coffee as a gift. I have a friend who at my last job who was part of a coffee of the month and tea of the month club because everybody knew that she liked coffee and tea, and that's what she got as gifts. So ask for coffee as a gift. The next thing on that list of costly C's are going to be your children. Of course, now we're not saying get rid of your children, obviously, and I'm sure your children appreciate that, but children can be expensive. According to the Wall Street Journal, it costs over $300,000 to raise a child in the United States in the year 2022, which is an average of about $18,000 a year. that cost has risen significantly because inflation is currently at a four-decade high. So some ways to beat in the costly seas when it comes to children is number one, setting some ground rules. Like when you go shopping, make sure that the kids know if they're able to get anything, how much they can spend, or what the item's going to be. When I was growing up, my mother often told us, listen, you can have one thing and one thing only at the store. Sometimes she made it clear that I wasn't getting anything, so don't ask for anything. And that's fine. I wound up just fine being told no every once in a while. But set those ground rules for your kids. If you find that your spending is getting out of hand, make sure you're using built-in spending control features in apps or gaming systems. I have a niece who's 6 years old, and she figured out how to do those in-game purchases on her mom's cell phone when she's playing games. And my sister-in-law found out right away that those things add up quickly. So make sure you're using built-in spending control features in games or apps, and set limits on extracurricular activities. And that, once again, that doesn't mean that you have to cut out everything, but sometimes things like football, ballet, piano lessons, those things can get expensive, and you might have to pick and choose which ones you're gonna be doing. Your children are a blessing. And of course, there are many things other than what we're talking about that you can do to reduce the amount of money you spend on them. But once again, just keep in mind that setting limits on those things are okay, and treats are okay as long as they're in moderation. Next is carryout. According to the USDA, the average cost of food has risen 5.5 to 6.5% since last year. So, some tips to help you with carryout is number one, when you go shopping, shop with a budget and stick with the budget. I tend to shop with a budget. I always shop with a budget, and I've actually gotten really good over the last couple of years of not getting anything that's on my list. I'll be honest with you, when I first started shopping with a budget, I always wound with things on the list, but sometimes I would wind up with things that weren't on the list. But I've gotten really good at that. You could also use those services that many grocery stores use, where they will actually do the shopping for you. You sign up online, you submit your list, and they will do the shopping for you. Some of those grocery stores might charge a small fee, like $4 or $5. Some grocery stores, there are grocery stores in the area where I live. Actually, I shop at Kroger here where I live, and as long as your bill is, I think, is over $30 or $35, they don't charge you anything for that. So consider that that's a good way to make sure that you're not going over your shopping list. Also, a meal plan, a meal prep. Plan your meals and prep your meals that you're going to be eating throughout the week, or even if it's just a few times a week. Planning and prepping those meals can help you save money. Keep in mind that eating out even 3 times a week, and let's assume you're going out for lunch, that can add up. The average cost of a meal, if you're going out for lunch, is $8 a day. If you're doing that 3 times a week, that's $24 a week. Over the course of a year, that's $1,248 a month. Just keep in mind that despite saving you the hassle, eating out isn't going to save you cash. Statistics show that more than 54% of families order carry out at least once a month or more. So once again, instead, try planning and eating at home. Your budget will thank you. Next costly C is cable. According to CableTV.com, streaming services prices rose from 48.9% in 2012, from 2012, I should say, to 2002. So in the last 10 years, from 2012 to 2022, streaming services rose 48.9%. Cable and satellite prices rose 33.84% over the same period. And the average price of streaming rose from 7.55 a month to 11.24 over the last decade. So some tips to help you beat the costly C with cable is considering cutting cable. That's something that I'm sure all of you have heard. It's something really popular where people are choosing different ways to get their entertainment. They're using streaming services. One thing that I know a lot of people are doing is that, since with most streaming services, you aren't locked in. I know people who might sign up for a streaming service for a month or 2 months because maybe there's something they want to see. And then once they see what they want to see, they cut it out and maybe choose another one. Another option is maybe just choose one or two streaming services. For most of us, and myself included, I really only watch two streaming services regularly, and those are Netflix and Disney Plus. I do have other streaming services, but a lot of those, I got to be honest with you, I don't watch them regularly. So consider choosing just one or two streaming services if that helps you out. Also, use your local public library. Often at your local public library, you can borrow movies for free. Some public libraries even will have services where you can actually stream movies for free. And lastly, use apps on your phone to watch TV for free. There are lots of apps such as Roku, and several others that will allow you to watch TV for free. You just have to watch commercials like you do for regular broadcast television. But those are ways that you can save money while with being the costly sea of cable. Probably one of the biggest costly C's that most of us deal with is our car. According to the latest research from AAA, the average yearly cost to own and operate a car, or a new vehicle, I should say, in 2022 is $10,728. And that's just owning and operating it. That covers things like gas, insurance, maintenance. And that breaks down to about $894 a month. That's a considerable increase from 2021 when the average cost was 9666 or 805 dollars per month. This is an increase of about $90 a month. For most of us, other than our home, our car is going to be the largest expense for most households and personal budget finance budgets. Once again, gas, maintenance, cleaning, those things can seriously eat into your monthly budget. So consider what you drive and why you drive it. Does it help you get to your job, or is it merely transportation? Or are you trying to make a statement? For those of you on this webinar who live in southeastern Michigan, you all realize that we don't have very good public transportation in these parts. We are more dependent on our vehicles than places like Chicago or Boston, where they have good public transportation. If you must use your car all the time, look for ways to cut your costs, such as combining trips or carpooling. If you can get away with it, have maybe just one family car. Be sure that you're shopping for insurance whenever your insurance is expiring. That's a great way to save money as well. You can also shop for, consider switching to a hybrid car if that's something that works for you. And I know it doesn't work for everyone, but if it works for you, that's something you can switch to. Consider switching or rotating your tires. Things like that can have a big impact on gas mileage and help you save money. Consider downgrading and like I said, carpooling as well. Remember, there are always options getting from here to there, even in an area like here, Metro Detroit, where we don't necessarily have the best public transportation. The last costly C is with your cell phone. Many people, and myself included in this one, like to have the latest high-tech smartphone that comes with all those bells and whistles. Unfortunately, that can also come with a hefty bill. It's always a good idea to shop around to see if you can save money. Many cell phone providers have special offers to change companies, and that way you can get the best of both worlds, a lower monthly payment and that newer phone that you always wanted. You can also consider switching to a smaller carrier or pay-as-you-go plan. You could also consider using alternative service such as WhatsApp, Vonage, Skype, or others to reduce the number of texts you use. If you are staying with the cell phone provider that you have, consider negotiating a lower bill. Sometimes that works, and it doesn't hurt to try. Avoid upgrading, and that's a trick I had to learn. I used to upgrade my phone every year, but now I'm waiting 2 to 3 years to upgrade my phone because I've noticed that when I do get that new phone, the new features they have aren't even things I'm using anyway. Remove any extra features, things that cost money, such as the a lot of times shopping apps and things like that. Those things can add up, especially if it's something that's tempting for you, where you're tempted to spend something just because you get an alert. And also consider sharing a plan with family. I have lots of coworkers, I think Dawn is one, who actually share their cell phone plan with their family. Also, if it's feasible, cut your landline for those of you who still have one. Many of us, we don't use our landline anymore anyway, and this is a great way to reduce your costs even more.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. I do. I share my cell phone plan with actually a few members of my family so that they don't have to pay that main line. So it helps them, and I'm already paying it, so why not? Also, I just realized last week is I went online and was able to switch my cell phone plan to a automatic debit for the payment, and they were giving me a $10 monthly credit. So I was okay with that. I wanted to take advantage of that. So thanks for those tips. So next, we're going to move into financial impact of debt. So we've talked about how to get prepared and ways to free up more money to become debt free. Let's spend some time talking about the financial impact of debt. Why is this such an important topic to discuss, and how do we see the warning signs and figure out a plan? So let's start out with our credit score. So why does carrying too much debt have such an impact on the credit? Well, let's take a look at what drives our credit score. So as you can see from the screen, 65% of the credit score is calculated based on two major factors: your payment history, and the amount of debt that you owe. So if you're carrying too much debt, your credit will be impacted. So here's an example. Say you have a credit card, has a $5,000 credit limit, and you have a balance of $4,900. You're utilizing 98% of your available credit, and in turn, that is having a large impact on the overall credit score. Basically, looks like you're overextended, which you may be. Also, you really want to keep that utilization at about 30% or lower of that available credit limit to maximize that credit score. So again, if you still have that $5,000 credit limit, try to carry a balance not over $1,500. The debt not only impacts the utilization, but also if you carry too much debt, you are at risk of falling behind on your obligations. So let's say you're kind of maxed out on that credit, you have an emergency, you have no savings to fall back on, and you're again mostly maxed out on the cards. It's really going to put you in a bad position. You're going to have to make a really difficult decision. So if your car breaks down, now you're going to have to decide, do I fix my car or do I pay my credit card? Well, if you need your car to get back and forth to work, needs to get fixed, you're probably going to end up missing the payment on that credit account. And that impacts 35% of that credit score. So you can see that carrying that amount of debt is going to have a pretty a significant impact. You're really in a no-win situation, would lead us to the next topic. And again, we're going to talk further about that debt freedom here shortly. So just as important, if not more, carrying too much debt impacts our ability to save. This is where this vicious cycle comes in. If I can't save and you have that emergency we just talked about, you'll likely turn to your credit cards if you have that available credit. So the cycle continues and will continue to harm you. Saving should be in a regular practice in your budget, something that you're going to be consistently doing so that that debt eventually is no longer going to be holding you back. So think about how you can automate that, make that a standard process so that when you're figuring into that budget how much you're going to be setting aside, again, and we talked about it earlier, make sure you're continuing to do it. Put the savings, the emergency fund as part of that overall budget. So Bill's going to talk a little bit about strategies, and take it away, Bill.
All right, so yep, so thank you, Dawn. So it's possible that you've seen people on the on this path, and that's the trouble paying off debt, or maybe you're struggling with it yourself. A lot of times, it's hard to know at that point what your options are for getting out of debt, or even who you can trust. So for the next couple of minutes, we're going to explore the different options for resolving debt issues, so that you have the tools you need to be able to help yourself and others understand the available resources to help them when they're struggling with debt. I want to start by talking about a couple of various options that your lender may be able to offer you. Some of these are options that can help you if you're struggling, and some of these are options that can help you if you just want to save a little money and pay off debt faster. So if you're struggling, you can look at a loan deferment, and this is a type of hardship. And when you get a loan deferment, a deferment excuses a person from making loan payments for a set period of time because of a specific condition in their life. For example, student loans can be deferred when a member returns to school or experiences an economic hardship. Interest may or may not continue to accrue while the payments are not required. So in other words, it's possible even though you're not making payments, your balances are going up because you're still accruing interest. So it's important that you know the terms of the deferment and if you are accruing interest during that time. Also, you can look into a forbearance, and that's when the lender allows the person to adjust the payments to a lower amount without any type of financial penalty. The interest on these loans will typically be added to the onto the end of the loan, and in some circumstances, the lender may allow the person to make an interest-only payment until they're able to start repaying back the loan. To apply for a loan forbearance, the consumer has to go through the lender. They also have to keep in mind that it's up to the lender to decide if you qualify for the forbearance. It's not an automatic process. Each lender will take a look at the application and they will cast a deciding vote on whether or not that person is actually going to need it and actually if they're going to get it. If the lender does decide to grant a forbearance on the loan, the time frame will vary and the conditions may be determined by the lender. Other options could be a loan extension. And this is an arrangement between your lender and borrower, and that's, as the name implies, it can extend the term of the loan. For example, it may allow someone to skip payments and have until the end of the loan. You see that a lot around this time of year at Christmas, where lenders will say, "Hey, we'll let you skip your car payment for November or December. That way you can do Christmas shopping, but we're going to add that to the end of the loan." And you don't always have to be in trouble to take advantage of options like this. Just consider that, keep in mind that when you're doing that, you might be paying a little bit more interest over the long term. Debt consolidation. This is a loan that will provide enough money to pay off the other debts, so that going forward, you only have one loan with a fixed interest rate. This can be a great option if the lender must continue within their means going forward to avoid starting the debt cycle all over again. Genesis actually offers debt consolidation loans, so be sure to reach out to Genesis if you're interested in a debt consolidation loan. Let's talk about communicating with your lender directly. When you ask the representative answering the call, first thing you want to ask them is if they have the authority to reduce interest rates or remove fees. If they don't, ask to speak to someone who can. It can be very discouraging to speak with multiple representatives only to have them transfer the call to a supervisor after a supervisor. And you don't want to you want to get to the person, if you can, that can help you as quickly and efficiently as possible. You also don't want to waste that other person's time, though. So it's helpful to understand what suitable options might be available. And we'll talk about some of those in a little bit. But if you're looking for a workout option, you must know what kind of payment schedule is going to fit into your budget. It's extremely important to know when dealing with creditors who only offer one workout for the length of the credit for the debt. So in other words, some creditors might say, okay, it's one and done. You're going to get one option, one opportunity for this, and if you fall through it, you may not get a second opportunity. Finally, keeping good record keeping is essential. You should record who you spoke with, when you spoke with them, what was agreed upon, include what actions was taken, if any, to confirm the arrangements. And just to be sure, I want to go over the things on this slide here. When you're making a call, make sure you ask and speak to the decision maker. Make sure you know your options as best you can before you speak with them. Propose a new payment and make a paper trail. Another option we're working with a third party, uh, if you're looking to repay your debt in full, is something called a debt management plan, also called a DMP. These are offered by nonprofit credit counseling agencies like GreenPath. And on the DMP, you work with a counseling agency who's going to provide you with coaching and review all of your options to make sure that that the DMP is a good fit for you. This agency, in this case, GreenPath, is going to contact your creditors on your behalf. They have arrangements in place, and most of the time with these creditors, so that you'll be able to receive concessions. Typically, those concessions are going to be lower interest rates, waived late fees, and often it's going to include a lower payment. You're going to make a deposit to the agency based on your pay schedule, and that agency is going to distribute those payments on time each month to your creditors. This arrangement allows debt to be paid down faster and money to be saved, because although you're paying back the full principal, you're paying a lot less because you're paying less interest, which means more is going back toward the principal rather than more going toward interest and fees. Um, the next slide here is actually something that shows someone who actually went through a debt management plan. And you can see when we first spoke with them, the interest rates were in the 20 to 30% range. When they actually got on the debt management plan, their interest rates dropped in most of those cases to the single digits. One of those creditors dropped from 24% to 17%. Each creditor has their own different ways of determining who is going to get concessions and how those concessions are going to be figured out. Some creditors have set concessions where pretty much everyone's going to get the same thing. Other creditors doing it on a case by case basis, and it's really up to the creditor what those concessions are going to be. But in this person's case, their monthly payments dropped from about $740 a month to $442 a month. They saved almost $300 a month, and once again, let's keep it in mind they're paying their debt off in full, but they were able to get reductions on their interest rate to make those debts a little bit easier. And so, Don, let's talk about how to keep those debts low once you've paid off your debt.
Okay, thanks, Bill. So again, now that Bill has discussed various options that you can use to take care of the debt, let's discuss ways to keep the debt low long term. So the most important component in all of this is to not add more debt in the future. To do that, you want to continue to maintain that monthly budget. I know that we've talked about it a lot throughout the conversation, but it's so, so important. Excuse me. This is where everything begins and ends. So again, be sure you know your cash flow. What do you have coming in and what do you have going out? Also, be sure to track the spending. If you have no idea if the budget is being followed, there's no purpose to the budget. Your budget is to give every hard-earned dollar you have a purpose, and tracking it will ensure you're following your plan and working towards your goals. Build your savings. If you are really serious to pay off the debt, you need to have an emergency fund so you won't continue to add to it. And be sure it's an emergency and not a want when you actually go to use it. Emergency savings should be part of that budget, and if it isn't, you should make it a priority. If you find yourself pulling from the savings on a regular basis, it may be a sign you are spending more than you earn, and you should take a look at your budget again. Another way to create a consistent habit without having to touch is to not have to touch it is to automate your savings and your debt payments. What I mean is setting up an automatic payment from your checking account to your monthly bill obligations and setting up a direct deposit from your paycheck for your savings. And this is how I manage my finances. It's really out of sight, out of mind. I have the money going directly to the savings, and then it just sits there until an emergency does come up. And then for my bill pay, I automate those. Actually have them set up through the creditor, like my mortgage, my car, and it just automatically comes out. So next, always strive to pay more than just the minimum payments. So we have an example here just to kind of reinforce this. So again, you have a plan to pay off the credit cards, including include that best practice of paying more than that minimum. So if you take a look at the screen, all things equal, the balance on this debt is $2,500. APR, annual percentage rate interest rate, is 18%. So if you just make minimum payment, $62.50, it is going to take you up to 17 years to pay that off. You're going to pay out about $5,600 in payments towards that debt. If you just add $50 a month, you're actually going to significantly reduce your time to pay off. Dropping down to under 3 years and about $3,000. Look at all that savings that you're going to have in interest. If you could really stretch the goal, get $100 a month going to that account, you're under 2 years and you're going to save even more interest. So that power of putting more towards that minimum payment is going to be essential. And also making sure that as you pay off an account, redirect that money into the next account. Don't put it back into spending, put it back into debt reduction. So again, we really hope this webinar has been helpful. If you have questions about checking or savings accounts that will help you create that spending plan and budget, definitely reach out to Genesis. They can help you, or if you want to look at that consolidation loan, you can reach them at 800-521-8440. You can also look at their website, genesiscu.org, to obtain some tips to save money and manage your budget. If you're interested in discussing options to help you become debt-free, including creating that budget, looking for ways to save, and discussing credit impact, creating that action plan with one of GreenPath's financial counselors, you can reach out to us at 877-274-7580, or you can go check out our website at greenpath.com/Genesis. So as a reminder, we're going to send out an email with a link to the recording, as well as the budgeting worksheet and that aligning priorities worksheet. Also, you're going to receive a survey that'll open in your browser. We'd really appreciate it if you'd fill that out. We're also going to stay on the line. So if you do have additional questions, and I know we have a couple that have popped up into the chat, go ahead and put them in now. We want to be sure that we get those answered. I'm going to put into the chat also those contact information, so that you'll be able to look at that. So again, thanks everyone for staying with us and in getting this information. We hope you have continued success and you have a wonderful day.
Thank you, everybody.